Online, Dolores?
Yes.
Oh,
I'm
great.
fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. I call the Select Board to order today, Tuesday, August 15th at 7:08 p.m. Motion to open the meeting.
So made.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Roll call. Mr. Gito?
Here.
Mr. McCrisky?
Here.
Vice Chair Cavey?
Here.
Mr. Carrara?
Here.
And I'm here. I ask that everyone stand if you are able to salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extends the Governor's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 20, until March 31st, 2025, this meeting will be conducted both in person and virtually via Google Meets. The meeting will be recorded by SMAC Cable Television and broadcast live and may be live streamed at www.stoughtontv.org. A recording of the meeting, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceeding will be posted on the town's website and/or SMAC as soon as possible after the meeting if the live broadcast or live streaming is unsuccessful. Times are approximate, and items may be taken out of order at the chair's discretion. Moving right along to our agenda items, we'll start with Select Board comments, and I will start with Mr. Carrara.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We had a passing in our town actually yesterday, and I got the call. This woman was a longtime Stoughton resident, and the history that she brings behind her that a lot of people in this town do not know. I'm lucky that I know the family, but it was Mrs. Lois D., and the D stands for Doubleday Howe. And Mrs. Howe is the grandmother of Christine Howe, who was former Select Board member. She's the mother of Timothy Howe, who was a town rep with us. And her son Peter graduated in '79 with me, and their son John, who runs a concrete business, form business. The history that I want to pass on to the town residents is that the name Doubleday is a very Yankee name. It goes way back to, she is a direct descendant of the father of baseball, Abner Doubleday. She is also related to Brigadier General Doubleday, who was leading the Union forces into the first battle, and it was ruled that he was the first one to fire the shot in the war between the states. So she was always active in our town. She would go to zoning meetings, she would go to planning meetings. It interested her. She went to a college that I've never heard before, but Lou might have heard of it. It's Swarthmore College, and she graduated with honors when it wasn't fashionable for women to go to college, and she actually graduated with Mike Dukakis. They were classmates. So there's a lot of history there in the Howe family, and she met her husband Lanny there when they were going to college. So to the Howe family, and I'll extend it as far as Christine out in Idaho, that from the board we send our solace that they lost their grandmother. But she went she went peacefully. The family told me they were all with her when she went, so that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Carrera. I would like to go next. I wanted to talk about Kayla Motley. Kaylee Motley is the daughter of Keith and Angela Motley that are residents of the town of Stoughton. Keith Motley was the past chancellor of UMass Boston, and he was on the search committee when we recruited for one of our past town managers. So regarding Kayla Motley, it is with great sadness and difficulty that I share with you that his daughter, Kayla Motley, passed away. She was found unresponsive in the Motley family home in Stoughton, Massachusetts on Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. She was in her late 20s, a graduate of Stoughton High School. A celebration of life was held on July 28th at the Morning Star Baptist Church, located on Blue Hill Ave. The viewing was with the family at 10 o'clock. In lieu of flowers, the Motley family is requesting contributions to the Kayla Motley Memorial Fund at Eastern Bank at 397 Washington Street, Stoughton, Mass. 02072. Kayla Iman Motley was born in Boston, Massachusetts on April 4th, 1996. She grew up in Stoughton and graduated from Stoughton High School, where she was an outstanding student and superior athlete. Kayla earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, majoring in social thought and political economy. She had a passion for public service and giving back to the greater Boston community, which led her to work at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute and as a development team member at Partners in Health. Kayla grew up on the UMass Boston campus and was proud of the recent naming of the Motley Resident Hall. Kayla was known for her beautiful smile and generous spirit. She loved to travel with family, including cruises to the Caribbean, leadership missions to Costa Rica, and trips to London and Paris with her mom and grandmother. She also enjoyed visiting her sister Jordan in Miami and New York. She is loved and she's missed by all. Thank you very much. A moment of silence, please. Thank you, everyone. Let's move right along. Are there any other select board members with comments? With there being none, let's move to town manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few minor announcements that we will get to later on in the agenda. But we're going to ask that the board approve a September 5th date to close the town meeting warrant, which we're asking you to open this evening. We've spoken to the moderator, and with your concurrence, he has no problem whatsoever with that. We'll speak to that later on. Second thing, on that same September 5th date, we're going to ask you to vote the labor contracts that you reviewed in executive session, that you vote them in public session. Because of that change of date, we have no need to have a meeting for next Tuesday evening, unless the board members have a reason to want to meet next Tuesday evening. That meeting was a special meeting for the purpose of closing the warrant and voting the labor agreements. Those can now be put off till the following week with the agreement of board members. I want to speak for a moment about one of our agenda items, so I don't have to speak to it at that time. One of our agenda items is the first of many public information sessions with regard to the civil service issue that is being conducted across Massachusetts. Attorney Fedorov is going to speak to the state of the environment with regard to civil service. We're not asking the board to take a vote. We don't intend to bring it before town meeting until the annual, but it is an issue that we believe the town will have great interest in, so we intend to have no less than 3 to 5 public information sessions, tonight being the first of those 3 to 5 sessions. So again, we're not going to be asking the board to take votes or even render opinions at this early stage. This is just information gathering for the public to start assimilating what we're contemplating with. That's all I have, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Are there any citizens' comments? Yes. Mrs. Walsh.
Thank you. Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. Apropos to previous select board comments, Kayla's father's been a longtime member at Cedar Hill. Probably our most distinguished member. Also, I spent a lot of time with Lois Howe, because we used to go to a lot of the same meetings. And unless I'm mistaken, she was the only person I've ever met who lived in one of the communities that was drowned by the Quabbin Reservoir. I don't remember if it was Endicott or Gardner, but I can't imagine having your home inundated for the good of the community. But the reason I'm speaking tonight is, once again, I was locked out of the town hall. It was 6:15. I wasn't there that early. This is the third time I had the honor of being locked out with one of your fellow board members. But it seems that since I believe his last name was Almeida, has been reassigned to the library, there's nobody responsible for getting us in here. That's the only door I can enter safely because it doesn't have steps. Even the back door, the ramp isn't wide enough, and it's not an automatic door. I called Mr. Cavey because he's the only select board member whose card I have, and he came down. Gilda beat him to the punch and got Mr. Gito and I inside. But this can't keep happening. It's not like I'm coming at 5:30 like I was before. I'm coming after 6 o'clock. Your meeting starts at 7. I don't think I'm asking too much for the door to be open an hour before the meeting. And I don't know whose responsibility is, but eventually it's going to be cold and icy. And so I would like some assurance. I don't know, am I responsible for calling town hall during business hours and announcing when I'm going to be here again? Because I'm going to be here tomorrow at 5:30 for a 6 o'clock meeting, and I'd expect that door to be open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Walsh. Mr. Coulter.
Madam Chair, I'll take care of this issue. I've got a solution. I'll communicate that solution tomorrow. Just for the record, however, Thursday nights are the town's late night. Other than me being in the building that late in the afternoon, which is before every selectmen's meeting, I'm the only one here. So I'm not afraid of anybody walking in, but walking throughout the building unattended, not Cynthia, of course, but walking throughout the building unattended is something we have to consider as a security risk. But I do have a solution, and I'll call Cynthia tomorrow, and you'll be very pleased with that solution, Cynthia. We'll accommodate that. As a distinguished former member and citizen of this town, you've earned that right. I'll take care of this.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Are there any other citizens' comments?
Can I ask?
Oh, just 1 second, please. Mr. Gito. Thank you, Mr. Gito. Mhm.
We received today the resignation letter from Bill Rowe, who's been a very long-term fixture in this town and very helpful to the community, to town meeting, and to us over 25, 27 years, I think. He has accepted a part-time position in his community, and he's looking forward to not having to drive so far to get in and out, and to be able to get a job that he really would like to have. Not that he didn't like the one here, but it's an opportunity for him. And I wish him well, and I'm sure that the other members of the board do also. And I want to thank him, and I'm sure we all do, for all the work that he has done for the town over these many years.
Thank you, Mr. Gito, for saying that. Yes, it's with bittersweet emotions that we received his letter of resignation. He's such a good guy, and he's been around such a long time, and we respect him. But we're happy that he has an opportunity that he is happy about. So we want him to be happy. Were you going to say something, Mr. Coulter, or anyone?
Just a minor point of interest, Mr. Rowe glowingly submitted a letter of retirement.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
We're saying resignation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I meant retirement.
Of course, he'll be leaving, which
Right.
is the same thing, right?
Well-
But just so we celebrate his intent, Bill's been driving an hour and a half either way for 23 years, and it's taken a toll on him. And I can tell you later on, not to take up the members' time, but the class, the dignity, the grace that he demonstrated today it was just a thing of beauty. And so I, too, want to congratulate him for his time. Of course, fellow members should go sooner than myself. But the way he did this today was just very graceful. And I want to celebrate that behavior. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Vice Chair Cavey, and then Mr. Carrara.
So I don't want to jump in. I think that Bill's been a trustworthy accountant for the town, and the fact that he's one of the most transparent people I know. He goes really out of his way to make sure that everyone has the same information. They all have accurate information, and always goes above and beyond. And I think it's part of his nature, and I think that everybody who's worked with him can attest to this. But maybe not everybody can attest how talented he is as a banjo player. So I would just like to put out there that he offered a lot to this town, including some really wonderful music. And I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss playing with him. We meet up occasionally and play some bluegrass music. And I'll miss other things about him, but that's certainly going to be something I remember fondly. And hopefully he'll occasionally make the trip up and grace us with some music. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Cavey. Mr. Carrara, yes.
When my wife came home with this today, you could have pushed me off the chair with a feather. Bill was one of my appointments. It was one of my proudest appointments. I don't think you could have asked for a more classy individual, a man who showed the standard of excellence. That guy drove an hour and a half to get here, and he was here before people who live in the town would get here. His work ethics were like the ones that were beaten into me by my father. I mean, he was just, when you could count on him, and I'm going to miss him. I was proud to work with him and watch him keep this town in its hand, because you don't realize the job he does till you think about it and what he's done and the time and the effort. I wish him all the best. He deserves the best, and he should get it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Going back to citizen.
Madam Chair, one last comment, just
Yes.
let you in on an inside secret. I hope I'm not breaking Bill's confidence, but as we met today and he told me he's taking retirement, he did disclose something that perhaps you should all be aware of. He was at a bluegrass concert last week, a lot of banjo players, and I can't use his exact language because it wouldn't be appropriate, but he said after a week of watching banjo players, he decided that he needs more lessons every week and needs more time to do it because he's not half as good as he thought he was. He used different words, so I toned it down. So a little bit of a disclosure there.
He's great. He played in our Juneteenth event, so he's awesome. He has a high skill level in that area. Oh, but going back to citizens' comments, are there any other citizens' comments? Yes, Mrs. Walsh, and then Mr. Laurie, and then I'll check online.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I didn't know about this when I made my first comments, but of course I've worked with Mr. Rowe a long time. And as a town meeting member, I have to say that there's no one who's respected more by town meeting members. If there's a question about finances, they want to hear from Bill Rowe. And I think as a town meeting member who served for many decades, a lot of town meeting members have been suspicious of town employees and elected officials. But he seems to have gained the trust and respect of the town meeting members. Also, for 23 years, he's been giving me rides home, so I'm really going to miss him.
That's true. Mr. Laurie, please state your name and address, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm David Lurie from 18 Robinette Road here in Stoughton. I'm here to speak. This is purely not speaking for anyone else. I'm on the board of Stoughton Media Access Corporation. So I just want to share in the next 2 minutes some of my experiences. You know, in 2 days from now.
Excuse me, Mr. Laurie, you know we have no control over social media access, SMAC,
Oh,
right?
no, I'm sharing.
So-
I'm sharing some information that I felt was important to share. And I'm not going to be asking. I'm going to be asking a request. There will be a request at the end of my comment.
Well, it may not be appropriate because we're in the middle of negotiations, of contract negotiation.
Sure. Okay. Well, I just wanted to share my experiences since I joined the board. There was, a lot
Mr.
of.
Laurie, though.
Yeah.
We have no purview over the board and SMAC. We're in negotiations, and it may be construed a different way if you're trying to share some experiences. So,
Then I won't.
thank you very much. Are there any other citizens' comments? I'm looking online. I don't want to miss anyone. Thank you very much. Let's move to our next item, which are item number 5, consent agenda items. I'm asking my fellow board members if they would like to pull any agenda items, and those items are approval of open session minutes meeting of June 20th, 2023, and June 27th, 2023. 5B, which is application for road race or parade permit, Be Inspired Together Incorporated on October 15th, 2023, and 5C, which is water connection application, Sonia Carrera at 175 York Street. I'm asking my fellow board members if they want to pull any of those items.
Number 5.
5, A, B, or C, or all 3?
I mean, number C on 5, sorry.
Okay, Mr. Carrara is asking to pull item 5C. Okay. Yes, Mr. Carrara, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Normally, when we get a water request, we get a plan to show where the property is and where the water's coming from. And 175 York Street, I didn't have time to go look at it, but on here, there's the word curb box. So I'd like to know if the curb box is on the property, isn't on the property, and if the town's going to supply it, and how it's going to be done. I wasn't even sure if the water was up that far. So that's what I was trying to figure out.
Phil? Hi, Phil. Oh, sorry. Hi, Phil. Would you happen to have any additional information on that? I don't. Okay. Okay.
All I can say is typically.
Oh, please come to the microphone, please. I know we're catching you off guard with this, but maybe,
Yeah, and I'm reluctant to comment even, but typically it's a well gone bad and they want to connect to the town water. But as Scott said, I'm not even sure where the main is and what the plan is there. So.
thank you very much. I believe Sonia Carrera, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, she's online. If she is.
Oh, it's right here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Would you like to step forward and help us with some of the, I'm sorry, what are you saying? It's the, okay. Yes.
Sonia, would you mind taking the microphone?
Yes. Yes, please. And push the button so it turns the red to green. And the reason we're asking you to step forward is, first of all, welcome and nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Also, we wanted some more information. So would you like Mr. Carrera to restate his question, or did you?
I don't know about anything, how I can just help, because I have a well, and I try to find out how I can put the water from the city
To connect.
to connect, yes.
To connect.
I don't know if I can just find out a company can do it, or I didn't know.
Yes, Mr. McCrisky? We're going to try to help.
I thought it was a pretty simple application process. If somebody, since we've got the water, that it was just an application process through the water department. Have you filled out an application at the water department?
Yes, I do.
And so it's here, so we should be just approving it.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, I've seen plans in the past, but I don't think it's, I'm sorry?
It's not a new construction.
Okay.
Plans will be with new
Okay,
construction.
but I just wanted, because sometimes we see plans, sometimes we don't.
New construction.
You know, so, okay. So, all right, I'm okay with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Carrara, would you feel more, there's no one available to answer that question?
Nope.
So we can.
Then just pass it. I won't ask any more questions.
Can you explain what it is,
When
what you call it,
When
box?
when we get an application like this, and there's blue writing on it, and it says curb box ? That says to me, is the water pipe in the road there to supply this? Because there's a well sometimes because the water isn't there. If the water's there, then it would say on here, the town will supply the curb box and stuff like that. That's why I like to get a plan, whether it's new construction or not. It's just, you take the plot plan that's on file, and they can just put it on there and say that this is where it is in the street, this is where it's going. Then people know what's going on. I don't want to hang this lady up because nobody knows whether they're going to have a curb box put in, or the contractor's going to have to put the curb box in, or is the town going to put it in, and then there's another charge on top of that. There is a little bit to something that has to be looked into. I'm not questioning it to hang it up. I'm not making it look like it's a big deal. I'm trying to save this lady some time. When there's something on here, there's a question. Curb box. I understand the water. I know what's missing. And it's probably about a $2,500 item that she's staring at on top of the $2,500 entrance fee that we used to waive here for these people so we could get them on the water. But nobody does amnesty anymore, and I won't even bring it up.
Madam Chair.
Thank you,
I see.
Mr. McCrisky. Wait just one.
No, I bow to
Okay.
Mr. McCrisky.
Mr. McCrisky, and then Mr.
We have our water commissioner here, and it seems to me that there's questions about our application process, whether it's presented properly or it's not presented properly. Do we require plans? Do we not require plans? I'd like an answer on that. I'd like an answer on that, now. Phil?
Madam Chair, while Phil's coming to the podium, Gilda,
Yes.
may I ask Gilda a question?
Yes.
Gilda, the curb box is a handwritten different color word with a question mark. Can you tell me how that word and question mark got there?
That was sent to me by Karen from the water department.
And she,
It already had that note on it.
with that color?
Yes.
Do you know what that means, Phil? Why Karen would write that?
Yeah, because we're not sure if there's a curb box.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes you go to the tie card, Phil McNulty from Water and Sewer Department. Sometimes you go to the tie card, you pull it out, you can see there's a curb box.
Okay.
In the absence of a tie card showing a curb box, we will follow up in the field and try to find it. Sometimes they are there without a tie card. So that's just a missing piece of the puzzle here. So that's going to affect the fee, naturally.
Second question, Madam Chair. Is that fee that's listed on this application of $550, is that the hookup fee?
No, that's just the
550
flow.
gallons?
Yeah.
So what is the fee for the
They
hookup?
haven't been calculated yet, because until we get all the information.
I see.
But the fee will be, basically, it's, as Scott said, join the club fee. I call it 2,000 plus. And, let's see, a meter fee, inspection fee, and then they'll have to hire a contractor to do the private side.
So these applications come into the water department, is that correct?
Yes.
So the only question, Madam Chair, to Mr. Krisky's point and Scott's comments is, do the water commissioners require a plan? And if so, it's another expense if it's not prepared, or if they could just pick it up at the office.
Well,
That's fine.
the questions I've asked, and I'm going to put them both together. Why is it here now? It's not prepared properly. The questions aren't answered. Do we require a plan or not? We haven't done our homework on it. Somehow it made it here. It's a waste of my time right now.
But with all due respect,
Yeah, so
Mr. Select Board
my
Member,
signature,
I've seen no policy requiring a plan. I know it's a great idea, but you can't blame the
Take that aside,
superintendent.
Mr. Town Manager, all due respect. Take the plan out of the equation. We can't vote on this. We don't even know what we're voting for.
yeah, well,
They go out and they inspect it so that they will know what they're doing. But my point is, we can't blame the superintendent if a policy doesn't exist.
I'm not
It sounded that way.
No, that's not. I asked, do we require one or we don't? Because I've seen them come in before, and I've seen some that pass on the consent agenda for a water application. It flies right through with no debate.
My
So,
point exactly, sir.
all right, so it sounds like we need a policy on how they get here and what we want to include in that policy. And the vote would come up as to whether we want to have a plan, which I think, myself, I'd like to see a plan. We're a water commissioner. We're voting to connection to the municipal water. I want to know what I'm voting on.
Right.
So I would, with all due respect, Madam Chair, to make a motion to table this until such time we have a proper application back before us.
Can I-
Before
can I-
we,
can I
say
before
whatever?
we, before I accept your motion.
No, I'll withdraw the motion because I
Wait,
just, let's do it the right way.
Mr. Gito wanted a comment before you made the motion.
Yeah, no,
We didn't
this,
know it was
I'm
coming.
going to withdraw it and we'll see how it plays out.
Okay. Mr. Gito?
It's my understanding that the reason that these requests come to us is to determine whether or not we should allow people to connect to the water system. How they connect, how much it costs, is a different matter. And, I mean, from my perspective, at least it is, whether or not the person who makes the request decides after finding out that they might need to have a curb box or not have a curb box and may need to pay for it. That is another determination. But I thought that the reason that these things came to us is to determine whether or not the town had enough water to provide that water to an individual or to a corporation. Because we need to protect the water supply, I don't think that we need to design the water system. I think that's something that the DPW and the owner have to deal with. And as for putting it in, that's something that the owner or the town needs to decide. But on the strict issue of whether or not we want to grant the applicant the opportunity to connect to water and to use the water that the town has, I think we have enough information. We've got a request. We seem to know that we have water available within the town and are thinking of selling it rather than just keeping it here. So I guess I'm at a different place than other people.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with you, Mr. Gito. I believe that the reason this was presented to us today was to see if we had the supply of water that we wanted them, and it was okay if we approved them to connect. That was what we were working on. But it wasn't until the owner came forward and she actually said, well, she wanted more information to know who would be connecting, if it would be the town or the either she said that or Mr. Calder said that. So the decision that happens after we approve, I thought that was up to you and the inspector to make sure the connection fits the code. So I'm looking for my words to really say, it will meet code eventually, but I don't think that that's our responsibility right now. I could be out of scope with what I'm saying, but Mr. Carrara, help us out here with this.
We're the Street and Water and Sewer Commissioners. We have the
Yes.
right to ask for whatever information we want to make a determination. When I was on the board, when we took the MWRA water, we had to put a certain amount of water into commercial and industrial and a certain amount out for residential. We're supposed to watch that and know how many percent is left, and we put, I think it was 15 or 10% emergency to the side, just in case somebody had a poisoned well and say we couldn't give out water, but we had that reserve. Because I was on the board when we voted it. That's why they come here to us, so that if this woman has a poisoned well, then she doesn't have to pay one part of the fee process. It was waived for poisoned wells. But if somebody wanted to get on the water because they had low flow, then the town would get their fair due, the connection and the curb box and the permit. I'm not telling them who to get for a contractor. I'm just trying to make heads or tails out of this area that this might be a new house that was built like in 80-something, that was during the moratorium that had to have a well. So I can guarantee you there probably is no curb box for it. That's why I wanted to make sure before she gets in over her head and then the secret charge comes that, oh, by the way, we had to give you a 100-foot water curb box, because it's tricky on that street where the water is. Some of it's off the pavement, some of it's inside the pavement. I'm not making it hard. I'm trying to make it easy for us. You don't just rubber stamp these things just because they come in and we want to sell them water. We want to sell them the water the right way. So it doesn't cost her anything. I bet she has a plot plan. All she has to do is bring it in. They make a copy of it. Somebody draws a line on it down at the water department and says, this is the best place for the water for her, because it makes a difference which side it goes on. You can't run it over where the current well is. You can get it close, but it can't go where her septic is. It's got to be 50 feet away. At least it's in copper pipe, 50 feet away. But there's different things to look at. That's what I look at, only because I know what I'm looking at. But we do have the right to ask. We're responsible for the water and giving it out. We don't want to give out too much. We don't want to not give out. But there is water for residential. I remember when we set it up, how it was broken out.
Thank you, Mr. Carra. Mr. Coulter.
Madam Chair, I agree with Mr. Carrara's comment that water commissioners have an absolute right to ask. All I ask is that on this form, Phil, we put a note down here, please attach plot plan. If that's the will and the policy of the board, it shouldn't be a surprise to the applicant because it's not listed anywhere on this application. Please add a plot plan which can be picked up at Town Hall, just to save this confusion in the future. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. What is the wish of the board? Is
Joe,
motion?
what would you use for a motion? Do you want to approve it with the...
I would like to know what the water superintendent thinks, if this is a worthy application, and I would want to come up with a formal policy. And then we decide what that policy is going to be and how the application, because this one here throws me for a loop, because we've voted hundreds since we've at MWRA. We've voted hundreds of these. Why is this any different? Why is this getting this debate? It confuses me. So I think myself, I would support this motion, that it goes through a process, that Phil reports back to us as to what he decided, that we would give contingent approval to the water superintendent to approve this, and then he tells us what he did, to satisfy that it fits within similar applications. We have people that have submitted something here. We took that application in. They're here thinking they're going to get a vote. I think it's wrong to turn them away. So I would make a motion that the board approve this water connection tonight as presented in the consent agenda, and that the superintendent of water go out to make sure that this project fits all the guidelines as others that have been approved by this board, and that he come up and his staff come up with a suggested policy which will meet their needs and the needs of this board as water commissioners, and we can discuss that and see if we want to tweak it.
Because it's easy on new construction for everybody, because when you submit a plan to the building department to put a new home up, every utility has to be on that plan. So that's why, some people say, oh, it's only new construction. Well, old construction goes along with everything. It helps them to go in their records and go, oh, by the way, yeah, that's where the curb box is, because sometimes you can't find them to shut them off. And if they have a piece of paper that they drew the line on it, and Phil's very capable because he's a licensed engineer, of saying that this is the best spot for it. And I just think the board, we wouldn't be talking about this if I had a line on a piece of paper.
So that's the motion.
I'll
If
second
we-
your motion, Joe.
And then we can go, because it just blows my mind that we're even discussing this when I think of how many of these connections we've voted with one vote on the line item in the consent agenda. So, and I can understand that we need to be a little bit better at it. And Phil, it's in your hands. This is why you get paid the big bucks.
May I say something?
Yes, there's a motion on the table, Vice Chair Cavey. Oh, motion is on the table,
I second it.
and you second it, okay? And so discussion, Mr. Gito.
I think that the most important part of this is to have an as-built plan submitted or on file, probably in the building department and maybe the water department as well, so that as we move on, we know what in fact has happened and where that water really is. I mean, the starting plan is something that we may or may not need, but we do need to know where that water main is at the end of the day, I believe, because you need to know where the box is and all the other stuff if you need to turn the water off.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
Unless
Gito.
I'm mistaken, I mean, Mr. Carrara may have a different view on that, and
No,
I'd
when
be
the-
happy to hear it.
When the inspector comes out and you're putting the water in the way they want it put in, the inspector comes out, he measures the depth, he measures where the curb box is, and then they take a range tie to where it goes in the house. Most of them go under the foundation. Very rarely do you have to drill it and go through, but at least they have these books that are like 1 billion years old, and they're like worth $1 million because they got everything in it. It just gives them one more piece of backup, like you say, in another spot.
Right, I mean, that seems to be the critical part of this in terms of the plan part. I mean, the other things that we're dealing with in terms of commercial and residential percentage and the amount for emergency use is something that perhaps we should have a handle on once a year, once a month, whatever time period, so that we know what we're dealing with. But these applications would seem to me to boil down to, do we have enough water to give out, and do we want to do that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a motion on the table. It's been second. We're in discussion, but I didn't want to cut you off, Phil. I know you might have some final remarks before we take the vote.
Sure, yeah. So I think you've all hit on it. Like, the main purpose of this, Lou hit on it, Joe and Scott, is that, do we have the available water to approve, giving it to somebody, a new residence in this case? So that's the main purpose of this. Second question, which is after this, is there a curb box or isn't? That affects the construction and the price. And we usually figure that out ourselves. In this case, curb box question mark is the question mark on this one. If there is a curb box, then we're not really involved except to collect the fees and inspect it. If there isn't, we have to tap the main and bring it to a curb box, and then the homeowner takes it from there. And we figure, as Scott mentioned, we figure that out what's best for us. Is there a bend in the road? Is there a driveway? So is there a septic system we need to stay 10 feet away from, and all that? So myself and my foreman, we usually figure out the best spot for us to tap the main and bring it to a spot on the property line that's not going to, where the curb box is not going to get hit by a plow or something like that. So. But the main purpose of this is, do we have the water, and do you guys agree that we can give this resident 500 gallons of water, 550? So.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Now, on the vote, On the motion, let's take the vote. Mr. Carrara,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cavey,
Yes.
Mr. McCrisky,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Gito, and I vote yes. Congratulations.
Madam Chair, was that on the consent agenda or on that particular item?
On this particular
Thank you, Madam
item,
Chair.
we pulled it aside and we
Thank you.
addressed that only.
Motion to accept the rest of the items on the consent agenda.
Second.
And those consent agendas, item 5A was the approval of the open session meeting minutes for June 20th and June 27th, and the application for the road race or parade permit Be Inspired Together Incorporated on October 15th. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 And I vote aye as well. Thank you very much. Moving right along to the next is...
Madam Chair, may I ask a
yes.
question?
Yes,
A
sir.
request through you to the board. Attorney Fedorov is with us this evening to discuss the civil service information. We're always graced by her presence, but she's very expensive. And I wonder if we could take her out of order and do that now so she's not sitting here for a couple of hours. It's the will of the board.
I think that is a great suggestion. Would you like, is there another chair so she can join
use
us
my
at the table?
You can use my chair, too. I've always wanted to be in the audience.
Well, hello and welcome.
Hello. I give a great discount, though. Not that expensive.
Okay.
So I'm here tonight to discuss civil service because there are just a lot of questions that are floating around as to what civil service is and what the options are relative to civil service. So tonight's discussion is really not a discussion, it's really just an introduction to this topic, and the town can make whatever assessments or judgments it wishes to in the future. But essentially, civil service is a system that was developed at the turn of the century to create a fair method of hiring, free from nepotism, free from political influence. And what it did was it created an exam process whereby civil servants would be subject to an exam prior to hire. So you knew you were hiring competent individuals, not necessarily people who had an inside track, right? And it was done at a time when there were fewer protections for employees. So there were very few discrimination laws at that time. The Ethics Commission, which exists now and governs all public officials and employees and prevents certain actions that are taken by those employees due to conflicts or familial connections, et cetera. Those laws didn't really exist at that time. So they created this system, and towns had to opt in. Towns and cities had to opt into that program. And many towns did, some didn't, but many towns did. And that program worked very, very well for years and years and years. And after certain laws were put in place which protected employees, which empowered employees. So think of your labor relations statutes. So 150E is the collective bargaining statute, and it really empowers employees to unionize and therefore have a stronger voice. Once those laws started going into effect, some communities felt like civil service was no longer necessary, right? Because it's a little bit of a cumbersome system. There's, again, a test, and there are processes if you want to, say, not hire the person who tops the exam. You have to go through a bypass process. There's an appeal process from there, et cetera, et cetera. And in addition, some communities were feeling that the civil service exam wasn't yielding applicants based on some of these kind of finer skills. So as these jobs became more sophisticated, no longer do we have clerk typists that are just typing up dictation. We have much more sophisticated positions. And what they were finding was that the civil service exam wasn't necessarily tapping into that category of people or properly quantifying some of those intangible assets. So what's the person's character? Do they have strong leadership skills? Do they have problem-solving skills? Some of those things weren't necessarily apparent from a multiple-choice exam. Furthermore, there were some funding issues at the state, as always, right? So some of these programs, so civil services is comprised of two components. One is the HRD side, which is the Human Resources Division, which does the exams and develops the exams, et cetera. And then the Civil Service Commission side is more of the adjudicatory body. So they're the body that decides whether or not a person was properly terminated or if a person was properly bypassed, so not selected for a position. The HRD side of the house was lacking funding. So, for example, what was a comprehensive system, which included both public safety and non-public safety positions, so your DPW, your clerical groups, that no longer had a test. So there were communities that had these civil servants who had passed the exam, had civil service protections, but then those positions no longer were being tested for, so then how did you select them? They delegated that authority to the communities to create their own process regardless. On the public safety side of the house, again, people were I guess, disinclined to believe that the top exam scorer was not always your best applicant. So you may be a person who's really superior on test taking, but you may not be a great police captain or a police lieutenant because you can't manage people, right? And that wasn't being quantified. So communities started to leave, okay? And the process for leaving is different for each community because you go in the same way you go out, and sometimes it's a little bit complicated. So, dozens of communities left. Some communities in recent years have attempted to leave, but because of the process they came in, they required special legislation to get back out. And many applications, and we're hearing in the dozens, if not closer to 100 municipalities are sitting up at the legislature kind of in limbo, waiting to see if the legislature will approve that special legislation to let them leave. But once that process does happen, those communities will leave. So now you're in a situation where there are fewer civil service positions available in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As a consequence, people aren't going to take the exam because they don't have as much opportunity. Because when you could go to 10, 20 towns in your neighborhood or in your area, now you're limited to 2 or 3, or whatever the number is, depending upon where you live. So fewer people are taking that exam. So I've heard that where 20 years ago, 30,000 applicants for people would sit for the police exam per year in the Commonwealth. Now it's more like 5,000 for the entire Commonwealth. So the number of applicants have decreased, which is prompting more exodus, right? It's a circular kind of thing. So that's really where we are today, and that's civil service in a nutshell, I guess. I don't know if you have any other questions or any thoughts.
Yes, Vice Chair Cavey.
You mentioned that the way we leave has to be the same as the way we came in. There's 2 questions. When did Stoughton join civil service, and also how did we enter?
So Stoughton entered in 1906 for the police department, so a long time ago. And the good news is they entered by town meeting vote. The thing that, and we just got that information today, the thing that is unclear to me is whether or not at the time, in 1906, whether or not you had an open town meeting or a representative town meeting. And
That was going to be my next kind of question.
Oh, okay.
It was really related to that. I was wondering if the form of government changed, what happens if you can't exit the same way you came in?
Yeah, I had one community where that was the case. And so town meeting's a funny thing, right? I mean, a representative town meeting isn't all that fundamentally different, except for you do have fewer people that, it's actually probably the same amount of people that attend in my other towns where it's an open town meeting, but they are representatives, but it's still a town meeting form of government. And I'm not sure if the legislature contemplates that as being radically different. And certainly there's no case law on this because I had to research it for a different town. But what we said in that particular town was we wanted to do a belt and suspenders approach, so we exited through a town meeting vote and then sought special legislation to essentially ratify the town meeting's actions. So, but there are a couple of things that we can think about when doing that, but I'm not necessarily prepared on that topic fully tonight since I just got the information today. And that was, I believe, the police department. The fire department, I want to say 38 was the fire department. And I also believe that was through a town meeting vote. Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I have a couple of questions, but mine is really grassroots to help me better understand civil service in its entirety, how it relates to, once you take the exam, what else does civil service control? Is it your reviews, or is it just your performance? How do they weigh into the whole life of an employee that's under that civil service umbrella?
Yeah. So the civil service has retains jurisdiction over the employees. So for example, if I'm hired as a police officer and I take and sit for the civil service exam to become a sergeant, and say I top the exam, but for some reason, let's say I have something in my file, right? I had some discipline. They choose to bypass me. I can do a bypass appeal, and civil service says, hey, did they have reasonable cause, and that's the standard, to do a bypass. If I'm fired as a police officer, civil service will review that. Some collective bargaining agreements have a dual path where you can elect to either go the civil service route to challenge a discipline or go via an arbitrator. And some communities have a dual path. Some, if you're a civil service, you can only go to civil service, et cetera. So they do retain certain jurisdiction over the employees, so specifically for promotions and for discipline. Because again, and not to belabor this point, but again, when civil service was instituted, you didn't have unions, right? So that's a recent event. Not so recent, I mean the 80s, right? I think it was end of the 70s, early 80s when public employees could unionize. But what civil service was trying to do, and successfully did for many, many years, was to say, well, we have a brand new select board and we dislike whomever because they held a sign for someone else. And so as a consequence, they're being fired as a police officer. So it took that political motivation out of the employment decision arena. Now, of course, that wouldn't exist anyways, because even if you weren't civil service, I don't know of a single police department. I could be wrong maybe in some of these really, really smaller towns, but very few police departments, for example, are not unionized. And then even if you weren't in civil service, you would have that review through an arbitrator because of 150E.
So if we dismantle the civil service, who are we impacting? Fire, police, dispatch? I don't know.
So fire and police superior officers, so both units of the police department. But again, we're not talking about dismantling it at this meeting. This was sort of just an introduction to what civil service is and where it is in the state of the Commonwealth.
Please use your microphone, Mr. Carrera.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry. He was whispering to me. No, he was just not mic'd.
Even if we do like we did for Public Works, we voted, that John Batch asked us to vote that out. There are members that are still in there under civil service. They have protection, so they have what they grandfathered. So it would be the new hires coming in would be the most affected.
It's the new hires and those who are promoted out of their positions. You're absolutely right. So if I am hired as a civil service police officer and I continue as a patrol officer, and 5 years from now, even if a town were to get out of civil service, I would have those same civil service protections until I subsequently got promoted to sergeant or lieutenant and on from there. Yes, but it's new hires and promoted employees. Yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Cavey, you have a question?
More of a comment than a question. I apologize, but I tend to, when I hear about something that happened a long time ago, kind of wonder, well, if you kind of take that same amount of time and you apply it backwards even further, what was there? How is this kind of the midpoint of things? And 1906 was 117 years ago, and 117 years before that was only a couple of years after the signing of the U.S. Constitution. So it really, this landed pretty much, entering civil service was in the middle, very middle of the United States history.
True.
It's been a very long time, so I'm not at all surprised that people might want to just ask the question, like, does this still really apply today? Is this still really going to work the way they would have envisioned it in 1906?
Yeah, every 117 years you should maybe evaluate your situation.
Yeah, so we'll have a select board policy of every 117 years.
Right.
Reviewing some of our policies.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank
Attorney
you so
Federal.
much for having me. And I
Anytime.
shall see you soon.
Oh, Mr. Coulter, did you have a question before Attorney Lee?
Madam Chair, I just want to reiterate once again for the good people of Stoughton, we're not anywhere near making a recommendation to this board or to town meeting. This is the very beginning of information sessions. It's a decision of town meeting. We expect to have hearings with town meeting representatives. We invited them to this meeting this evening, or invited them to at least watch it on SMAC, because it's the very beginning of a series of presentations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving right along, going back to our agenda item number 6, dog hearing decision 408 Technology Center Drive, apartment 5420, Rosalina Geller.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
for the record, I'll be recusing myself from the vote because I was not here for that public hearing, or for that hearing anyway.
Thank you very much. Attorney Winter, would you like to take the lead? I believe we're here to review and approve your letter for distribution.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and yes, that's absolutely correct. So, as you will all recall, we spent 2 evenings going through a public hearing on this matter. At the conclusion of the public hearing, when the board went into deliberations, the board took a vote and then authorized and instructed me to reduce that vote to writing and a written decision memorializing your findings and determination and order. That's the document you have in front of you to review tonight. I would also like to inform you that I shared this document with Deputy Chief Holmes and Officer Carlos, being 2 individuals that I considered stakeholders in this process. The complaint that brought this matter before you originated with the police department. And so I wanted to share this with them and receive any comments and feedback that they might have. I did receive that, and I've incorporated it into the document. One place in particular I just want to highlight where I received feedback and where I made changes. On the first page, condition 3, as you'll recall, when we concluded the public hearing, there were some questions just about sort of logistics of how training and seeing a behaviorist might happen. And so I wanted some essentially expert advice on how to write that condition. And so I sought that from Animal Control Officer Carlos and received that. And so I wrote that condition with her recommendation. And so I just wanted to highlight that because it is a little bit different, sort of mechanically, than what was discussed at the board meeting, but that's really the only change that we made, and that was just to address certain logistics of how trainers and behaviorists kind of do their job. So that's condition 3 on page 1, and the rest of it, I'm happy to hear any comments, concerns, questions you might have. If you have any questions for me or if there's any changes. Again, this is a document that I created based on your record, based on your minutes, my notes from the hearing. I take no pride in authorship, and so to the extent you have any questions, concerns, or comments, or would like to see changes, if you authorize and sign this, or authorize your chair to sign this, this becomes your decision. And so I want to make sure you're all comfortable and approving of it. And so nothing here is written in stone. I'm happy to make any changes as the board deems appropriate.
Okay, I'll open the floor to my fellow board members. Do you have any questions for Attorney Winter, or are you ready to make a motion? Okay, would you like us to read the letter aloud? Just 1 second, please. We're allowing time for...
Okay, I just wanted to review the section that Attorney Winter mentioned. Ought we to recommend or at least appoint a designee tonight, or should we do that sometime in the future?
Can you repeat that,
Yeah,
Vice Chair Cavey?
so Section 3 says Dakota shall be evaluated by a behaviorist approved by the board and/or the board's designee. And I wonder at what point do we either make that designation or of the behaviorist or of the designee?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Attorney Winter.
It's really up to your discretion. I just wrote it that way so that you would have more control over the process. It's not necessarily, considering how busy your agendas can be, something that you need to spend time on a board level. So if the board was comfortable designating one of your members, or it could be anyone, in fact. I mean, it's anyone you designate to make that call. I just know that you wanted a process whereby you saw who this person was going to be, what their qualifications were, and said, yes, that's appropriate, that's consistent with our decision. How you go about that, I leave to you.
Perfect. And I appreciate you taking the time to craft that and consider that. So, but I just wanted to understand if there's a recommendation to do that tonight or at some other point, but it sounds like it's very much within our discretion to do it whenever we think it's right. Thank you very much. I have no other questions.
Yes, Mr. Coulter.
Madam Chair, if it satisfies Mr. Cavey's concern, I have no problem being that designee and working with the Ms. Carlos, the dog officer, to make sure that we follow up on this and report back to the board.
Perfect. Yeah, I was hoping to kind of cross that off the list so we don't have to wait around. So when we make the motion, I'll make that motion afterwards.
Thank you.
Before we close, Mr. Carrara, did you have, okay. So are we ready to make a motion? To accept the chair to sign the letter?
I move that we accept this letter as written and that we designate the town manager as our designee with regard to, our designee with regard to finding a behaviorist.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. And let the record reflect Mr. McCrisky recused himself from this. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, just one point of order.
Yes.
As I've crafted it, it states that the chair will be signing it on behalf of the board. I can easily change that and add all the board members' signatures. How would you like me to proceed on that?
Okay.
I think it's okay to have just, I think you have you sign it on behalf of the board. I'm fine with that. Does anybody have any objections?
Okay. Looks like consensus has been made.
Okay. I just wanted that to be clear on the record. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So moving along to the next agenda item, which is item number 7. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't really. Oh my gosh, I apologize. I didn't recognize you.
That's okay. I do have a couple of questions, because I'm going to appeal certain things that you guys said, the meeting said. So when does that 10 days start? Does it start tomorrow? Does it start when I get the letter? Because I only have 10 days to appeal.
Attorney Winter, can you respond to her question?
Yes, and I want to be a little bit delicate here because Ms. Geller was represented by counsel.
Oh, yeah, he's there, right there, Jonathan.
Okay, so through the chair to Ms. Geller, that's a question that Ms. Geller should be discussing with her own counsel. Neither myself nor this board should be giving legal advice on when the statutory appeal periods are triggered or when they expire. But I know just from having worked with your counsel on this matter, he's perfectly capable of answering that question and will certainly answer it for you. I have no doubt.
I did ask him that in a text, and he said to bring it up here.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you, sir. And another question is, your decision was to put Maverick, euthanize her. Until I appeal, can Dakota stay with Maverick? Because I don't want Maverick to be alone. Because Maverick is not, you guys didn't want her to be euthanized, which I'm very thankful for. But I disagree with Maverick being euthanized. So I did speak to Officer Carlos because I don't want Maverick to be alone. So can they stay together until after the appeal is done?
Madam Chair, may I respond if that's okay?
Yes, please, Attorney Winter.
And I'll actually respond with sort of a comment and then maybe a recommendation. The status quo, when we concluded the public hearing, is that both dogs would remain kenneled under the control of the animal control officer, and that Ms. Geller would continue to pay the nominal fee for both dogs to remain there. And so it's up to Ms. Geller now, once this decision is signed and issued, which will likely be tomorrow, whether or not she wishes to retrieve Dakota. She does not have to. And so unless the board wants to discuss changing that status quo, both dogs can remain, I'm not going to say quarantined, but they're kenneled now, impounded, unless and until Ms. Geller wants to retrieve Dakota, as long as she keeps paying the fee for doing so. And so that can remain the status quo.
I'm looking at consensus. Yes, the intent of this agenda item was to sign off on the letter based on what we said in the past. So it was not changing any disposition at all.
And Madam Chair, may I just ask through you to counsel, who I guess is available on Zoom, and my question is just, was that entirely clear to Attorney Moriarty, if he can hear me, just to make sure that my comment was understood? I don't know if he's able to respond, but I just wanted to make sure
Currently on
that.
mute.
Ms.
I'm not sure
Geller?
if he's-
Understood.
Understood.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair, for indulging me there.
Thank you very much. All right.
Okay, so they can just stay together? Okay, and my, one more question. I haven't received a bill for them being with Officer Carlos. Am I supposed to receive a bill, or am I supposed to just write out a check to the town? Because I haven't received anything, a bill for them being with Officer Carlos all this time, since the 14th of June.
Madam Chair, I will follow up on that in the morning as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coulter.
Thank you for raising that.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Item number 7 on our agenda is boards and committee appointments. Vice Chair Cavey, I asked you to take the lead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is for the appointment of the Board of Registrars. Just as a reminder to everybody, the appointment for the Board of Registrars is different than all of the other appointments we do. There's some Mass General law that governs how this is undertaken. It's for anybody who wants to spend the time looking it up. It's I think it's Chapter 51, Section 15. And this requires that we send a letter to the Democratic Town Committee and the Democratic Republican Committee, the Democratic Town Committee and the Republican Town Committees, and request a list of names for the seat. The statute specifically says 3, but whoever they send. And if we don't receive a list within 45 days, then we can seat anybody else, anybody to whom we want to give this appointment. We received 2 names from the Democratic Town Committee, Stoughton Democratic Town Committee. In the first letter, there was an amended agenda. I'm going to have to go through a little history here, and I apologize for it. But the list they originally sent, they included an error. They put the wrong name in. You'll have a physical copy of the correct name, letter sent from them with the correct name. And there's an extra wrinkle. The 2 names they originally sent were Don O'Neill and Larry Sauer. Don O'Neill was the incorrect name. It should have been Lester Davis. And Larry Sauer has reached out to say that he withdraws his interest in being on this board. So that leaves us with truly 2 names, Alethea McFarland and Lester Davis. Alethea McFarland, she included as part of her application, which was just an email saying, I'm interested in continuing to serve on the Board of Registrars. But I just want to highlight that, according to the Town of Stoughton annual report from December 31st, 2020, the town clerk, her report mentions there are some changes to the registrars this year. Our member, Alethea A. McFarland, decided to resign this year, and we will miss her and wish her the best. So she is not an incumbent currently. I just want to make that clear that I think she was looking to return to the Board of Registrars, but she is doing so as unenrolled. And Lester Davis, who we should have in our hands, is the person that the Democratic Town Committee has submitted, is currently the incumbent. He's currently in that seat. So this would be if a vote for him would be to return him as an incumbent to that seat. So I know that's all a little bit confusing. I apologize for that. We truly have two nominees, or two people who have put an application in. One is Lester Davis, who is an incumbent, and then Alethea McFarland, who is a previous member.
Thank you.
Mr. Gito?
Alethea is unenrolled. Lester Davis is a Democrat. And I believe, I'm going to double check on Mass General Law. This is, for some reason, I have like a blind spot to this particular section. I believe that we are, so long as we received a recommendation from the parties, from the Democratic and Republican parties, I believe we have to draw from those lists before we can choose somebody other than somebody that's on one of those lists, which Alethea is not on a list provided by a party.
So the material that I'm unfortunately having a difficult time hearing all of what you just said.
Okay.
That's my fault, not yours. So McFarland is on a list somewhere or just has submitted the email that I see in front of me?
Alethea submitted an email, that's all. She's not been provided.
So she has not, she is unenrolled and she has not been nominated by the Democratic Town Committee.
Or the Republican
Or
Town
the
Committee.
Republican
Correct.
Town Committee. So we only have one person that has been nominated.
Yeah, this Plinko ball ends up in only one place.
And so we have to appoint people who are Democrats or Republicans.
I think they have preference over anybody else. And they have to be Democrats or Republicans who are submitted by the parties.
So that means we have one person.
Right.
I nominate Lester Davis to be a registrar.
That makes sense.
All in favor?
For the Democratic position on the, right, okay.
Motion was seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. Moving to our next agenda item is item...
What do we do next?
On this item?
Well, in this item, we just make Lester aware that he's...
What is the other part of that? We have to have a sufficient number of registrars.
Correct, there was
Do we
only
not?
one open seat, and that was the only open seat.
Oh, that is the only open seat?
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't catch that in your discussion.
Apologies.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving to item number 8, acquisition of Washington Street Pump Station and land thereon. Mr. McNulty, Water and Sewer Superintendent. Hello again, welcome again.
Phil McNulty, Water and Sewer Superintendent. So before I would start describing where we are with this, is do we have a recorded easement plan, quitclaim deed with easements and so forth? Is that why this agenda item is here?
It's to have the vote on the purchase. Brian, is this your work?
My office had been working on the transactional documents, and so the town meeting had at one point approved this, but it hadn't been ready to actually be consummated. There were some, I believe, there were some technical issues that were being resolved. And so my office worked on the acquisition documents through Phil's office and department. We were alerted that we were ready to move this forward to the board, and so the only thing left is to approve these documents so that the town acquires the property in accordance with the town meeting vote.
And Madam Chair, I'm sure the board has noticed this. The motion describes our action here, the proposed motion.
I'm prepared to make this motion.
Please, Vice Chair Cavey.
Okay. I hereby move that the Select Board, as authorized by Article 61 of the May 1st, 2023 Town of Stoughton Annual Town Meeting, acquire the sewer pump station and the land thereon, including any easements as may be needed to operate the pump station. The land is shown as Lot 1 on a plan entitled Form A Plan of Land Washington Street in Stoughton, Massachusetts, dated January 3rd, 2019, and prepared by the Outback Engineering Incorporated, which plan is recorded at the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds in Plan Book 679, page 20, and to further authorize the chair, Deborah Roberts, to execute and enter into any and all documents necessary to officiate the acquisition of said property. Effectuate the acquisition of said property. I'm fading fast, apparently. Sorry, guys.
Second.
Yes, we have a second on that motion, though, but discussion, Mr.
Just for discussion, just for the public's view, I know you have it in front of you, the consideration for this purchase is $1, and the presentation before town meeting by Mr. McNulty was to demonstrate that this station, which was built for this project, meets all of the town's requirements and has been fully inspected and is in brand new repair. The purchase of this is for $1, so we will take over the operation of the station from this point forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Motion on the table, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Unanimous decision. Thank you, Mr. McNulty.
Madam Chair, while we're going to the next item, I just want to let you know that the town council sort of ran off with the things that were supposed to be for me. Then I don't know if we should do anything about that or not, or maybe. Thank you.
We'll give you the data dump, Mr. Gito. Okay. Item number 9, Stoughton Logistics Center, address licenses and easement. Mr. Winter, or Attorney Winter, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to walk us into this, but I will ask for Mark's assistance as we get a little bit further into it. So just sort of by way of introduction, and I'm going to speak sort of from 50,000 feet as to some of the legal aspects of it that I've been involved in. And in terms of the project and some of the details on the ground and what's proposed here, I'll rely upon Mark to provide some further detail on that. But you, I believe, are all aware that the Stoughton Logistics Center is a project that went through a town approval process, received those approvals some time ago, and is now a fully permitted project that is starting to do some of the post-permitting work to get underway. And at some point in the future, that will come together and they will start looking to build out and construct their approved project. Now, as part of that, and knowing that, I started to have conversations not only with the proponent of the project and their engineering and legal team, but also with your town professional staff. So one thing that often occurs with a project that's coming into Stoughton is that we start to look at potential mitigation and impacts and other aspects that might be of concern for your town planner, for your engineering department and other town departments, and see if there are ways that we, the town of Stoughton, can make this project better on any level, for how it integrates with your streets and ways, for how it integrates with traffic configurations around a particular neighborhood or site or main throughway, et cetera. And so to that end, Mark Tisdale and Bill Roth and I, along with the proponents, team started having preliminary discussions about different ways that we might approach that. And you may be familiar, in fact, more familiar than I am, with the streets around this area, in Old Page and Page Street. So we have a graphic that we can put up at some point, and I think maybe Mark can speak to it or Bill can speak to it, but there's kind of an unusual configuration of public ways in this area. And you'll see when you see the graphic, and in fact, in your package, if you look at the last page, which is an exhibit there, and this is what we're gonna put up on the screen in a minute, and I may pause just so you can see this while I'm talking. Great. So there you have it now on your screen. So you can see the access road for the project. If you could sort of highlight down there, there you go. So if you follow the red arrow, that's the access road for the project. And now there are sort of intersecting public ways that are going from sort of the top of your screen towards the bottom of your screen, and you can see they sort of curl around back on each other and so on and so forth. So it's kind of an unusual pattern, an unusual layout. So in conversations with your town engineer and your town planner, we started discussing, you know, are there ways that we could make this better? How could we improve the actual use of these town ways in a way that's more compatible, more consistent with this approved project? Are there any options from a town of Stoughton perspective that might be something that's not only compatible with what's going on there now, but what's going to be happening there when the project is constructed, and would make the users of this area have a better traffic configuration and better access ways for getting to their property and getting in and out of the adjacent sites as well as the project site. So what you'll see, and I think maybe Mark can speak a little bit better than I can as to these things, we started looking at ways to reconfigure the public way layouts over there. Because as you can see, the access road is going to bisect some of those roads. And so you're going to have a potential for, you know, conflicting traffic or just less than ideal conditions. So this is where I got involved. And so I don't know anything about engineering, and I don't know anything about how best to accomplish these things, but I can support your professional staff's efforts in terms of what is required of the town to get to this goal, to accomplish this goal. And so to that end, one of the things I suggested and we looked at was a licensing agreement, and this is one of the documents you have in front of you, that would allow a new configuration to be essentially installed on the ground in this location, where if you go just up the page from the red arrow, you'll see a little hammerhead, sort of, it looks like a little bit of a dead end there. But what that is, in fact, is an area where pavement could be removed in one area and then some pavement added to create a hammerhead in another area, which would create essentially a turnaround. And so through, because this is a public way, obviously the proponent of the project can't do work and can't make alterations to a public way without the Board of Selectmen acting as the road commissioners. And so one of the ways we can accomplish this is through a license agreement to allow them to do certain work that would be beneficial not only for their access road, but would be beneficial in terms of the configuration and use of the town public ways that intersect or are adjacent to that. And so obviously we wouldn't want to sort of interrupt the flow of traffic through Old Page without providing an option. And so the hammerhead is the turnaround option. And so if you come down there, there's the ability to turn around. And so both of those things would have to happen in parallel together, or it wouldn't really work, right? You'd come down and you'd have a narrow end of Old Page and nowhere to go from there. So the hammerhead is a necessary component of that. The hammerhead is on adjacent property, not town of Stoughton land. And so the way this is envisioned to a certain extent, and this again is through multiple discussions that I've had with Mark and Bill, is to do these things simultaneously and in cooperation with the project proponent. They have the ability to do the hammerhead. We have the ability to make Old Page more compatible with this project site. And so the last thing I'm going to say, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions, this is a lot to soak in a very short period of time. And I understand you're just getting introduced to this now, so I'm going to stop after one last comment, and that's that none of this would actually happen anytime in your immediate future. It requires certain instruments to be approved by this board or to be accepted by this board. And so these documents would have to be vetted and approved by this board, and then we would hold them essentially in escrow, if you will, until we knew that this project was actually going forward. Because if it doesn't, then none of this ever happens. But if it does, this is a potential way to make the situation out there a better one for the users of this neighborhood and for Stoughton. And so if the board sees fit ultimately to approve this license that would allow this to happen and accept the easement that would allow the hammerhead, then we would just sit on this license. We wouldn't give it to anyone unless and until we got what we bargained for, which is the hammerhead. And so until they're ready to give us what we bargained for, we don't turn over the license, which is what we would be doing in exchange for them. So that's the sort of fundamental concept of what we're talking about over there. So I'll stop there. I'm not going to go into the document itself. That's just too much to take on right now. But I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. And if it's the board's pleasure, I imagine you might want to hear from Mark about some of the engineering details and some of the planning details as to how we got here. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Attorney Winter. Mr. Tisdale, yes, please.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to just stand up and point. I'm more of a visual person.
Do you need a pointer?
I got one.
Okay. That was the index finger, right?
Right. All right. All right, let me refocus here. Okay. Just a little recap. Obviously, this project went through an arduous review process through the planning board for site plan review. Obviously, traffic was analyzed to the nth degree by the town engineers, by Bill, by our third-party traffic consultants. One of our key components when we were looking at this is right now, this portion is not there, right? So if you took that out, that part, you can kind of see what's going on. How do you get in there efficiently with trucks and cars? It just doesn't make sense. So one of the key review components was to get a more standard access T-type intersection that can handle the trucks and the cars. They provided that access here, but by providing that access, now you've got roads coming in at different parts and pavement, the existing pavement blending in at weird angles and things of that nature. It doesn't make sense. Can it happen? Yes. The project can move forward with exactly the way it's constructed right now. But with the proposed improvements, it kind of cleans up the geometry. You're dead-ending this road. It's not necessary anymore. This will be grassed. This pavement comes out. That's the purpose of the license agreement. So one less road coming into an intersection. Vehicles will not be able to come down this portion of Old Page Street, so all cars and vehicles are coming down this way. There's one business down here that can still come down through Old Page Street and access their business. All the other vehicles go through an existing access easement that goes to the property. This portion's already there right now. So essentially that's what we're trying to do, is just clean up the traffic flow and geometry in that area.
I'm just processing all the information you just provided, but do my fellow board members have questions? Yes, Mr. McCrisky.
Not a question, but a comment. I've followed this project from before the application process had started, meeting with the developers, and this was a plan that was well thought by the developers to limit the impact on what we all know is a hot issue, is Turnpike Street. And they came prepared, knowing that information, to look at every means to put traffic out onto Page Street. It's been well vetted on the traffic counts by a consultant that we hired, the town of Stoughton hired, Mark's staff, and paid for by the proponents, by the applicants of this. So it was vetted, looking at, how it was going to impact or not impact the town of Stoughton. And this is something that's going to bring during the various presentations anywhere from $2.3 to $2.7 million in new revenue. It doesn't tax the schools. It doesn't tax public safety that much, other than fire protection, which we have all over. And with some of the budget discoveries of our new town manager, I think we all know that revenue will come in very handy. So I would just ask my colleagues if they would consider voting for this. I think it's a good plan. And again, it limits the impact of neighborhoods. The traffic counts off the charts, primarily from truck traffic coming from and back into the town of Avon. And it was minuscule amount of maybe, I believe, 100 and something vehicle trips one way out, and then return trips. So it wasn't anything near what we get on that road now, as well as at the cost, not paid by the town, is a rebuilding of Page Street as well, resurfacing, curbing, and so forth. So it's a nice piece of property. I think that my colleagues, the only one that was here when we brought this up, Mr. Carrara, when we got a couple of pieces of property abandoned to be put out to bid. And the last one was just put out to bid. I shouldn't say, it was just completed, was put out to bid recently, but the property was voted to be disposed of in 2015, and it just passed hands 2 months ago. So it takes a little bit of time, and that property is not nearly as big as this is. And I think this is what we all talk about when we run for office, that we want to see responsible development come to Stoughton. That's good for the town. It gives back to the community, and there's definitely going to be some jobs here, and with these jobs, it would not make sense. It's not high-tech warehousing and distribution that a lot of people from Stoughton would have a crack at those jobs. So that was just my 2 cents after following this thing for months and months and months, and Stoughton being Stoughton, right? So that's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McCrisky. Vice Chair Cavey.
Thank you. So I have some very, very quick, simple questions. The fact that this has been scrutinized by our development services team, but also by the planning board, sets me at ease. I know that the work's been done by the right people to do it correctly. I really just want to understand, the scope of exactly what's being asked here, and this is mostly from my own ignorance of these things, I have to admit. The two things that we're being asked for is address licenses and easements. And easements I understand. I don't really think I understand what's meant by address licenses.
If I could use my pointer again. The license agreement is to remove pavement within the right-of-way, right here. This portion of pavement is an existing constructed way, paved area, driveway, that kind of blends in here. We want to remove that because we're trying to channel all the traffic through here, and we don't want another access point coming into this road. It's not needed anymore. The last property that needs to access their property is this property. That traffic doesn't need to go through. That's why we're putting the hammerhead turnaround. The license agreement is to remove that pavement in that portion of the right-of-way. Am I missing anything on that, Bill?
No, and in addition, the Planning Board and Conservation Commission review this, where this is a wetland right here, and where all of this asphalt will be removed, it's a degraded wetland, and it's a whole wetland mitigation proposal to upgrade that from, the old road was built prior to wetland rules and everything else. So it's an environmental benefit, and it's a safety and transportation benefit too, to look at doing this.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may just add a comment to that. So it's just a license. I think I heard you say address license, but that just meant to discuss the licenses.
Address licenses.
Yeah, that's not the title of the instrument. Sorry, I just.
Not a noun phrase.
Forgive me for even mentioning. I apologize, but.
I did. I was like, I don't. Google it. I can't find it anywhere.
Inartful use of the language, I think, on my part when I wrote that. But second, and I just wanted to offer this because there's some precedent for having done this before in Stoughton. Yeah. So often we're presented with a situation where we're dealing with a developer, maybe it's a utility, for example, that needs to get into our streets. But to give them certain rights, it often requires a town meeting vote or some vote beyond this board. And so, for example, if you have a utility that needs to provide power to a new school project, well, they might not be able to wait until May. And so one of the ways we try to bridge that gap is to do a licensing agreement, to allow people to do work or give them access to town property being the way, short of a property right, which is something this board can't grant without town meeting approval. And so that's where the license comes in to fill that gap.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It seems like the scope of our duties here are extremely narrow and just really related to accepting an easement and approving these license, or approving the license or accepting the license. So I feel really comfortable with everything, and I'm in favor of. I see no reason not to grant these requests. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cavey. Mr. McCrisky wanted to add some information, and then Mr. Carrera wanted to also add some information.
I apologize. Not that add it, I forgot to say it. And so
Okay.
I started in the first two things that just got kind of put to the end and forgot them. Sorry about that. One thing I would be remiss is to say that following through this, and I'm biased because we've seen what our staff does when they're put to the test. When we had the fire station done, and this is another example that the way that the staff really went through this, working with the town council, working with the town manager, and the various boards and commissions is probably, it's the biggest project we've seen come through here, in the town from a land perspective. And it was, if we could get some more land, another 70 acres around here that just happens to be laying around, it would be a great project because it just all fell together perfectly. There was a good relationship. We had the developers here, Brookfield, and they were just, more wanting to work with the town. Is it good for you? If you don't like this, we can talk about a change. This change in the wetlands is a good thing. And then there was a businessman that caught me in a local coffee shop, and he said, what's this thing with the road going on? And I said, well, it's going to dead end the road. And he said, so no more traffic, using it as a shortcut, and then realizing it wasn't a shortcut? And I said, yeah, it'll be a dead end. And he says, oh, this is going to be great for me. I've got a private driveway now. So the businesses on that end, are happy with it. Two of them that I know of, because I called another person that I know, and on the other end, it's basically one business that gets very, very little traffic, towards that, where the right-of-way heads out to 24. And that's the one that we had problems, Mark remembers, with as a right-of-way that a private company down there put a fence right across the road that the town has right of access to and so forth. But, so no, Mark, you and your crew, Bill, everybody did such a great job working, through that process, and thank you for what you did. And thank you to Brookfield, who they have some people here tonight. Thank you for being here and working with the town the way you did. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCrisky. Mr. Carrera.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm glad Mark put up his finger picture today because I was trying to figure out what was going on, but
I was waiting.
This comes to better.
I was waiting for that little ET light to light up, you know?
I watched this transpire a little bit, and I'm glad that Page Street will bear the traffic because of the way they protected Turnpike Street, and, you know, it doesn't have a good drainage system on it anyhow, so this is a better thing. You got Milton Cat that's buffering on the other side, so it's a good thing. The only thing I want to say through you to Attorney Winter is, when you read this, there's a lot of people held harmless, and that's Town of Stoughton. That would be these gentlemen who work there. I would like to be, if it's not a problem, where I'm going to be a signator to this, I'd like to be held harmless, whether I'm sitting here or when I become a private citizen again for signing this, that if something pops up, I don't want to be dragged into court someplace, not saying it's going to happen, but I want to be protected too. So if you want to put that in there, you'll get my signature. Otherwise, I ain't signing it.
Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Carrera.
Yes.
I have no doubt we can add a clarification addressing that concern.
Because I wrote it down, it probably isn't as proper, but it says, "The signatories for now and after their term as Board of Select Persons shall herein be held harmless and not responsible even after the term is expired with their service to the town." How's that?
That works terrifically.
Thank you. I'm on board.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Coulter.
Madam Chair, just briefly, I want to echo what Joe had to say. He stole the words from me, and I feel compelled to say it anyway. I think that our planning and engineering capabilities in this town, having represented 6 towns before, including the big town of Plymouth, I can tell you they're unmatched. And I don't think another engineering and planning department throughout the South Shore could have collaborated with such an incredible organization to bring this project to Stoughton. So I want to congratulate Mark and Bill and the planning board. This is really big stuff. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Motion?
Make a motion to approve, as submitted.
Second. Go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Unanimous decision. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes, Mr.
point of
McCrisky.
personal privilege.
Yes.
If R.J. Lyman could sit up and just identify himself for the record, introduce himself, and R.J., if you could just give us a quick overview from your client's position. And
thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is R.J. Lyman, as you just heard. It's not usual the lawyer for a developer gets hauled up after they've been told yes. I think the most important thing I want to say, Brookfield is a great international company. They're one of the leading real estate development companies in the country. And I've been doing development all over the Commonwealth for 30 years now. And your town manager, Mr. Bukrinsky, they don't exaggerate. Your staff is truly extraordinary. I said this to the planning board, so I'm going to say it to you. It's not meant to tout my own virtues, but to give you a sense of context. I was in charge of environmental policy for the Commonwealth during the 90s. I saw a lot of things. I saw a lot of towns. I still do see a lot of towns. It really is extraordinary what you're doing here, and I would wish you every opportunity to do that with more folks coming like me to the town. They'll be as grateful as we are. Thank you both all very much.
Thank you very much, and it's so nice meeting you.
Madam Chair, if we could end the praise here, we're going to need a budget adjustment for these two people.
Great. Let's move along to our next agenda item, which is number 10, follow-up to the planning retreat. As most of you recall, we had a 2-day planning retreat on July 18th and August 1st. We started with noting some of the things, some of the items we must do throughout our calendar year, our fiscal year. We went on to our town manager, Mr. Coulter, citing his fiscal year 2023 objectives and how most are complete. Then we proceeded in a roundtable discussion with the select board and the department heads discussing what items they believe should be our priorities for this fiscal year. And when I thought about it, I said, these are real-life people sitting across the table from each other talking about real-life items. How many times does that really happen? It really doesn't, with all of us being present and openly expressing ourselves. We ended up with our objectives for the fiscal year of a total of 17, and that went from developing a policy manual, townwide beautification, stabilization, the depot, the fiscal management, the police department relocation, centralized purchasing with some set-asides. It went on, and we grouped those into several categories like financial and economic development, and we decided we could do all of those. We were in alignment, we were in consensus to do all of them. So what's next? What's next is how, which is on our agenda for tonight, how and when will the board receive status and progress on the major objectives? And then number two, how will we measure success on these objectives? So I turn to our town manager, Mr. Coulter. Maybe you could help us answer those questions.
I'd be happy to, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
The difference between a goal and an objective is a goal is oftentimes aspirational, an objective is measurable. So we work at Town Hall with staff on objectives so that we can measure them. So I was delighted that the staff at the end said, we know we can do all of these. And so that was exciting to me because I know we can as well. So my suggestion is that I report to the board quarterly on an update on where we are, progress made against each of those objectives on a quarterly basis. If we don't talk about it, it sometimes becomes a lesser priority. Not in my world, but sometimes it just does. So I would suggest that we put it on the agenda quarterly and that Jill to take note of that, and that every quarter we put the objectives back on the board. And as I used to say in business, we're either shakers or fakers. We either did it or we didn't do it. And by the end of the year, I fully expect we will have achieved them all, as we did in 2023. In 23, we got 18 out of 20 done. And that's what moves the town forward, and that's what keeps staff focused. So I'd like to thank you for organizing the retreat. Staff members were very excited about being asked for and given the opportunity to give their input. So I would say it was very successful, and it leaves our staff very focused. Everybody loves a challenge. So we're excited about this fiscal year and the things we intend to accomplish for the citizens of Stoughton. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Vice Chair Cavey.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about this, a couple of things. When you mentioned the idea of doing it, I thought it was an excellent idea. There were some areas where I was concerned, though, and I think I expressed these to you. One of the main issues that I didn't want to see happen, I didn't know was going to happen, was that employees would come and they'd get nervous. They really wouldn't want to share their thoughts, and they might feel like they're on the hot seat in some way. And that didn't happen at all. It wasn't even close. We had a lot of very free expression of ideas. There was no fear of disagreeing and getting in trouble. And I think we really got, once again, as always, the best out of the the people who work for the town. And they had great ideas, contributed well, and I just really wanted to thank you, Madam Chair, for having hosted this. I think it really worked out very well, and I think it's a great model for the type of interactions that we should have, I think, with the people who oversee the town. And one of the things that there were areas, I'm not sure, I'm trying to find the right way to say this. There were some areas of disagreement in particular that I thought were like really helpful conversations to have, to work through, and also just to hear firsthand maybe some of the thoughts people had, some frustrations people had with things. And it shined a light, the kind of light that we want to see, right? A lot of our interactions with town staff usually, to be honest, usually involves like budgets, right? We're not talking to them unless we're sort of trying to work out how much they need. We don't get enough of that sort of one-on-one strategic time, which it's very enjoyable to hear the people who work for the town who are so passionate about the work they do and knowledgeable and creative, and sort of get to see the sausage being made, so to speak, and how they think through problems and how they view priorities. And the idea that the universal consensus was, bring it on, there's no reason for us to limit ourselves, really is a testament to their dedication to the town, their personal excellence, and sense of pride in the work they do. So I just think it's a really wonderful experience, and I thank you for having hosted it and of conceiving of it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cavey.
Before I speak, did Mr. Gito have his hand up? Mr. Gito, did you have your hand up? No. Okay, thank you, sir. I want to give you a first-hand example of how it works. One of the objectives the team came up with was to build a collegial and collaborative relationship between the town and the schools. That led to Mr. Cavey planning a reception this morning, as you all know, for the superintendent, a welcome reception. We had 50 to 70 people here in this great hall this morning, where Mr. Cavey introduced the superintendent to all of our employees. We asked the superintendent to bring his staff with him, so they all identified themselves and met their colleague on the other side, human resource to human resource, finance to finance. The superintendent and I and the assistant superintendent have been, with Mr. Cavey, have been traveling the town the last 3 weeks with the superintendent to view all the schools, to understand their issues in detail. And the superintendent is interested in our issues that he can collaborate with us on. If that doesn't start as an objective, none of this may not have happened. And I can tell you, everybody left this meet and greet this morning happy about two things. One was to meet their counterparts in the school side and hear some very inspiring remarks from Steve and from Joe on collaboration and working together. And two, the muffins Mr. Cavey provided were the size of cakes, and they were pretty remarkable. So you start with an objective, it turns into a plan, and then it turns into reality. It's always worked in business, and it's working for the town of Stoughton. So thank you, Mr. Cavey, for hosting that.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Plan, 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 that's the key word. Well, moving right along to our last final agenda item, which is number 11, 2023 special town meeting articles. Open the warrant.
Madam Chair, may I comment on it first?
Yes, please.
We're asking that the warrant be open this evening and that it remained open until September 5th at our regularly scheduled select board meeting. We're asking that, so it would close on September 5th, and during that time, we'll continue to perfect the draft warrant you've got in your package. I would also like to point out to you that, and Reggie has asked me to make this clear, Each time the draft is updated, we're going to send a copy to the board members. In each date, please take note of the date on top so you know that it's a new, improved version. And from the version you have in front of you now, we are going to delete from that, and I'd like to explain why we're deleting it. The first issue is the article on the water meters. We've learned that we can pay for those water meters through the MWRA fund. It does not require a town meeting vote, but we would like to suggest that we have a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and work with them on what we're doing, why we're doing it, do a presentation, and get their input and their feedback. So rather than have it on the town meeting warrant, we would have it as a joint meeting with the Finance Committee. The second item is electronic billboard. I know we will not have free cash certified, so there's no sense spending money that we don't have yet. So I'm suggesting we put that on the annual town meeting next fall. Last thing is would like to remove the wage increase for part-time employees. We've determined that we can cover that through our budget. It was only 1 or 2 departments whose part-time employees, for some reason, were not given a wage increase, a modest wage increase, the COLA, the 2%. So we'd like to make that adjustment as an amendment. Excuse me, we can cover it through the budget, so no vote would be required, and town meeting is not required to vote on it. So those are the 3 changes we're making to this early draft. And as we make changes, as articles roll in, every other day, we'll send that out to you so you see where we are at that point in time. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Oh, Vice Chair Gavey.
So I just have a question. I feel comfortable that I know this, but since the town council is here, I think it's probably wise just to run it by him. Mr. Winter, at this meeting, at our current meeting, the only thing we actually have to vote on is simply to open the warrant, correct? We don't have to decide when we're going to close it or when town meeting, and what special town meeting is going to be or anything related to that. We just...
You should alert people to when you anticipate closing it, certainly, but you're not inserting any articles, you're not taking any other action, only to open it so that articles can be submitted for consideration.
Perfect. So yeah, so we as town manager mentioned, we have a plan to open it tonight, to close it September 5th, and the anticipation is that there be the annual, the special town meeting would be November 6th. November 6th. But as for tonight, I make a motion that we open the warrant for the special town meeting 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I vote aye as well.
Madam Chair, we'll be sending to you and the members in the morning on page 2 the revised schedule. Pushing it to September 5th is going to change all of those target dates, and we'll send that out first thing in the morning. Children and I will review it.
Will you mind also perhaps putting this on the town website, the schedule, and even perhaps as just a denoting that it's subject to change, maybe putting this on the town manager website to give town meeting reps, and perhaps even emailing it to town meeting reps just to let them know that this is the current plan. I think over-communicating is something you'd be perfectly on board with, but I think
we're in complete agreement.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll get that out to the meeting reps tomorrow as well.
Yeah, but we definitely, in big letters, read, subject to change.
Work in process.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Dito.
There is an important piece of indicating when we're likely to close the town meeting, and close the warrant, so that people who are citizens of the town know that they have to get their articles in by that date. So, I understand that we only indicated an opening date, but it seems to me that we owe it to the citizens to let them know when we are closing the meeting, so the warrant, so that they can exercise their right to submit articles. It's not just a trivial thing. We have form of government that gives them the opportunity to do that. So perhaps we should set a closing date for the warrant. We can change that to a later date, but I don't think we should change it to an earlier date if we choose to do that. I mean,
Or just to make a motion to set the closing of the warrant to be no earlier than September 5th.
May I-
second.
Before you make that motion, if I may, Mr.
Yes.
Tito, it has to be no later than September 5th, because there are statutory requirements for number of days.
That's 45 days, that's 42 days.
Exactly. So in order to have town meeting on the 6th of November, I agree completely with Lou's comments. I think we should say it's open. It will be open. It'll be open until September 5th, but cannot be any later. We'll have 2 extra days if we close it on the 5th.
Okay, so then it's the 5th, right? So motion to set the closing of the town meeting warrant, special town meeting warrant to September 5th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Last thing, Madam Chair, I'd like to thank the moderator. This date was not set unilaterally by anybody. Bob worked very closely with his committees, worked very closely with the town in coming up with the date and getting approval for it. Everybody worked very, very collaboratively, except my wife. I asked that that date be November 6th. Stop smiling, Bob. I asked that the date be November 6th, not knowing we started vacation in Aruba on November 3rd. So she's not pleased, but the staff is delighted, just so you know.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Mr. Moderator, did you have a comment? You all set? All set. Okay, thank you. Wanted to recognize you if you did. Mr. Gito, did you have a comment?
Are you not going to be at,
Only the day after.
I'm sorry?
I'll be at town.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have a question?
Okay. If the Select Board has no further business tonight, can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Good night, everyone, and have a nice evening.